All right, so today we are going to learn about 7.1 lesson, which is on monomials and polynomials. So our first word is a monomial. Okay, well, if you've ever seen the word or the phrase mono, it means one. So we're talking about one term, okay, and it has to meet one of three requirements. So A, B, or C. So it has to be a number, okay, so an example would be 7, 4, 15, negative 1/3, that's a number. You could even have pi in there because pi itself is a number. It could be a variable. Okay, but there's a special rule with the variable. The variable must have with whole number exponents. Okay, so things that are allowed are x to the first power, y to the second power, k to the fifth power, z to the seventh power. Okay, so let's just quick reminder that a whole number, okay, this whole number means that it is no decimals, no fractions, and also not negative. So whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, but they're not negative, they're not decimals, and there's no fraction. So any exponent has to have that. Okay, we could also have one more example. So we've got A, B, and C, where we could have a product of the number and the variable. And again, with exponents that are whole numbers. Okay, so a few examples of those would be 3x squared, 7y squared times x. So we can have more than one variable, that's fine. We can even have an exponent on the number, that's fine. But any exponent on the variable, okay, so these exponents right here, technically what's the exponent right here? Does anyone remember? It's a 1. Okay, so these are all whole numbers. So we could have 10xyz to the 17th power. Okay, we can kind of get crazy with that. But the thing that they are not, okay, so let's list some examples of not monomials. Okay, is any time that we have an exponent. So we could say on a variable, so x to the 1/2. Okay, because it's an exponent on a variable, and this exponent is a fraction, that's no good. We also cannot have variables in the exponent, so that's no good. Let's see, we can also have y z to the 1.5, okay? That is not a whole number. So all of these exponents disqualify these from being monomials. So now we're going to talk about the degree of a monomial, okay? So this is the sum of the exponents of the variables in a monomial. Okay, so a couple things we want to make sure. We're looking at only the exponents of only the variables. And it has to be of a monomial. Okay, so we're going to talk about polynomials in just a second, but monomials mean that there's only one term. Okay, so if we do a couple of examples, and then we want to figure out what the degree is, so let's go ahead and look at this. So we're going to do 5x to the squared. Okay, well, there's only one exponent, so my degree is actually right in front of me. It's a 2. But here, if we have negative 1/2 xy cubed, I need to take a little bit of a closer look because I have an imaginary 1 right here, and now I need to find the sum. Okay, so we need to actually add 1 plus 3 is 4, so my degree is 4. Okay. Now, what if I have a negative 3? I have no variable here, so the sum of the exponents of the variable is actually going to be 0. I can pick any letter I want, let's say a y, and it's going to have an exponent of a 0 because anything to the 0 power is 1, so it doesn't change that value, so the degree for that would be 0. Real quickly, if we happen to have something like this, okay, this 2 squared is really just a 4. So I'm going to ignore that, and then we're going to look at the exponents here. We have that invisible 1, so we're going to say 1 plus 2, degree is 3. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about, we've got binomials and trinomials. And these are more specific types of this thing called a polynomial. Okay, so let's go ahead and define these. Our definition is that this has 2 terms. This has 3 terms. And since both of these are technically part of this, a polynomial just has more than 1 term. Okay, so anything that has more than 1 is a polynomial. All right, so now we're going to give an example of each of these. So one example of a binomial could be 8q plus q to the 5th. So notice that we have a monomial here and a monomial here. So the fact that I have 2 monomials makes it a binomial because I have 2 of them. Okay. If we look at a trinomial, we're going to have 3 monomials. So we can just say 4 plus 5x squared plus x. Okay. So again, let's change the color. We've got 1, 2, 3 monomials together. Okay. And we can come up with a polynomial, but I'd rather actually just move on to this thing. So the degree of a polynomial is slightly different than the degree of a monomial. We're going to look at the degree of each one of these monomials. So let's look at the degree of this one right here. So the degree here is degree 1. And the degree here is a 5. Okay. The degree here we said is 0. The degree here we said is 2. And the degree here is 1. Okay. Let's go ahead and just make up another binomial where it's 3xy plus xy squared. So again, each one of these terms above only had 1 variable, so it's kind of easy to identify the degree. But we need to not forget that if there are more than 1 variable, we need to add the exponent. So the degree here would be a 2. And the degree here would be a 3. So when we're finding the degree of a polynomial, we take the highest monomial degree. Okay, so the highest monomial degree here is that 5. So our degree would be 5. Our highest monomial degree here is this 2, so our degree is 2. Our highest monomial degree here is a 3, so we take the 3. If we get a tie, then that will affect our standard form, which we're going to learn next. And we will just go in alphabetical order. Okay, so going through and listing the degrees of each individual monomial is helpful because it helps us write standard form, which means we need to write each monomial in descending degree. Okay, so over here, I have 2 terms, and I'm going to write it so that the highest degree is first. So this was my Q5 that had the highest degree. And then the next term was my positive 8Q. So I've written both terms. I have a higher degree for the first term than I do for the second, so we are done. This is good standard form. This trinomial, because it has 3 terms, I need to still have 3 terms. My highest degree was the 5x squared. Okay. My next highest is that positive x, and then that 4 comes behind. Okay, over here, my highest was the xy squared, and then next highest was the positive 3xy. And like I said here, if we end up with a tie, then we would go in alphabetical order. You won't come across that anytime soon, but it'll matter later on in the class. Okay, that's it for today on lesson 7.1.